Well, hello. Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, me too. It's
Good.
been warm where I live, so it's beautiful and sunny and lots of flowers, feeling like spring already. So it's a
Nice.
beautiful place. Yeah. So for those of you who are watching live or wondering what's going on, both Janelle and I had a little bit of technical difficulties, but thank goodness Janelle figured it out and, and got us all set. I am M.H. Elrich. I'm a Christian fantasy author. And then I'll let Janelle introduce herself and her books. I kind of proposed this as like a happy release day video for Janelle. I absolutely love her books. In fact, I have all four on paperback right here as proof. I need to add number five. Um, and so I am super excited to talk to her today, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your books, and we'll get into the interview.
All right. I'm Jenelle Leanne Schmidt, and I had just released my 11th novel. I am a Christian, and I write YA fantasy and fairy tale mashups and steampunk slash gas lamp, and occasionally sci-fi. I don't stay in a box well. Um, and yeah, so this is the last book in my Turrim Archive, just released today. And so that's my fun gaslamp fantasy, steampunk, airship pirates and wizards and robots, and paratroopers and all sorts of fun stuff happened in that series. So yeah, super excited to kind of be done with that series and looking ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do feel like I discovered you through Echo of the Fae, which is
Hmm.
your more YA fantasy, kind of fairy tale-ish,
Yeah.
fairy tale setting. And then you started talking about the term archive, and I was looking just for fun to see more steampunky books to read. And so I started on yours, and I was hooked from the very beginning. It's I think what you do extremely well is your characters. Your characters are, you want to root for them. You invest in them and you're like, I love all of them. Please don't let any one of them die. And you definitely scared me a few times in book five. I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but let's just say their lives are in danger often in the book.
Yeah.
So speaking
Well,
of, oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say when total war breaks out, lives do get endangered.
Yes. And I kind of got World War II-ish vibes from it. I don't know if that was the intention. I wasn't exactly sure, but kind of in that era or vein. Um,
Absolutely, yeah. When I was
yeah.
writing book four, I was struggling. It was the shortest book of the series, and two of my characters weren't doing a whole lot to help progress the plot forward. And I knew there was a problem. I just couldn't figure out what the problem was. And so my husband was like, "All right, we're gonna sit down and watch Band of Brothers." So we watched through all of Band of Brothers, and I was like, "That's what I need. I need them to be paratroopers." And that worked.
Yeah, it's interesting where where we get inspiration from. It just comes from these unusual places. It could be, like you said, watching Band of Brothers. Sometimes I'll be watching anime and I get inspiration. Sometimes it's something else, like walking, and you're like, "Oh, that's a great idea." And has anyone thought of that? I wrote a short story that was about vampires and communion and drinking the communion, when you drink the
Yeah.
communion and the bread. Okay, so literally my inspiration was the verse that says, if you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you will have part of me, like that verse from the
Uh-huh.
Bible. And then I thought, what if it was vampires?
I
So,
wonder if I'm pretty sure nobody else has ever asked that question. I love it.
no. So I think that, this is where that we as writers, that's what happens is you get inspiration from random places and you're like, that's what I needed this whole time to help
Yep.
me. So yeah, that's awesome. And I'm amazed you could get through Band of Brothers because I have tried to watch many a war movie and they're really hard on my heart.
Yeah.
um,
Oh
I
yeah.
think
There. a lot of crying happened, but
Yes, a
uh,
lot of tears, a lot of
yeah,
tissue boxes
yeah,
needed for that.
yeah.
Okay, so speaking of characters, so I always ask, who is your favorite, or maybe like who is the one that you tend to is the easiest to write? Maybe that person could be the favorite because I know we love all of them, but
Right.
what do you think?
Yeah, that one's a little hard for me. I do tend to write enormous casts of characters, and so there's always that. But I love all of them, and they all have their point of view chapters. And I grew up on old 80s fantasy, right, which was huge, multifaceted casts and uh,
Mhm.
limited or omniscient third person point of view and so that's I think that's where a lot of my characters come from. It's just this idea that, well, there have to be lots of people in the world for it to feel real. But with Turrim Archive, it really is Captain Merrick is probably my favorite. He's the easiest to write, and he kind of took over the story from me. So
If I had to guess based on reading the story, I would have guessed him. Just
yeah,
because, like, you think it's great. Is it Graydon? Am I
yeah,
saying that right? Graydon.
that's
Okay.
correct.
You think it's Graydon, and then Captain Merrick comes in, and you're like, okay, it's Captain Merrick.
Yeah.
Think it's just his suave or whatever you could call it.
Yes.
Takes over the plot. He comes in and charms everyone and is like, all right, I'm the main character now.
Yes, absolutely. Because
So,
Graydon was supposed to be the main character, and
mm,
he has to share the spotlight a little bit. And I love Graydon dearly. He's got a heart of gold. But Merrick is just fun, and yeah.
yeah. Draven is he's the young man character, right? He's the
Yeah.
young, aspiring young man.
Yep.
Merrick is a little more of like almost not quite veteran soldier, but at least a little more experienced,
Yep.
more of the adult figure. And then
Yep.
is it Dalmir? Is that how you say that? Dalmir?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah. Dalmy. Yep.
yep. I'm like amazed that the way I pronounced in my head is the way you actually want it. So he is definitely more like the older kind of like grandpa-y
Hmm.
vibes is what I get from him. So it's almost like a family in a weird,
Yep. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Very very odd.
yeah.
Multi-generational family. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I liked it because you brought in, so when we started, it felt like it was mostly just an all male cast when you
Hmm.
started your books. And then as you got further along, you added in Raisa,
Reza.
Raisa. Okay. And then, oh goodness, I'm forgetting her name.
Shayesta.
Yes,
Shayesta.
Shasta. And then in the latest book, you
Hmm.
added even more female characters, which were kind of a surprise.
Uh-huh.
And it was like a fun surprise. One of which you did hint at in the very first book, but I think most people have forgotten about until book 5.
Probably. I'm really impressed that you caught that, though.
He's like, because I remember that particular character, and I don't know if I really want to give spoilers, so I'm trying to avoid names, but I remember the very first character being mentioned, but it was kind of like, I don't know, because Graydon was like putting that character out of his mind. I think we as readers were like, okay,
Oh, that character. Gotcha.
yes, her
Okay.
in
Yeah.
particular.
I would. Have you read book 5 yet, or just
Yes,
through book 4?
yes,
Okay. Because
yes,
the other female character who shows up is also mentioned in book 1, but it's like a
yes,
very passing mention by
yes.
Dalmir. Yeah.
Yes, and Delmere in her relationship was kind of like also passing. So I really didn't even
Yeah.
notice like the little clues until the very end, which I guess I'm telling the audience now that all the Easter eggs are in there. So if you invest and finish the whole thing, you'll get your happy ending ish. Um,
Ish. I love it.
so I wanted to ask you because I thought I read somewhere online that the series was partly your husband's idea and partly yours, but I wanted to ask you, like, where did it come from in terms of, like, the origin story? Like, where did it first start?
Yeah, so this story, so my husband and I got married in 2004, and I was in the middle of editing and publishing, or I was in the middle of writing my first series. And so in 2012, we actually started publishing that series after all four books were written. But I was in the middle of writing this series, and he thought that was cool that I was writing this series, and he's like, I'm gonna try my hand at writing a story. He's a physics major and an engineer, and not really a writer, which he would say. I was like, go for it, that's so cool, right? So he started building a world, and he created the characters of Dalmir and Graydon, and then he started writing like this whole history for the world and the seven brothers and the towers and all of this stuff. And then he started writing the story, but he started writing it from the perspective of the history, and he got like a lot of pages written, and then he kind of sat down and he reread over them, and he was like, this is horrible, this is like a textbook, this reads like an engineer wrote it, you need to write the story. And I was like, no, 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 I'm not writing your story. That's not
Um,
that's not gonna happen.
yeah,
This is like a recipe for a disaster. And
yeah,
so for quite a few years he kept asking, and that was in like 2005. And so he kept asking and asking and asking, and he had this beautiful world created, and these a couple of characters that I'd kind of fallen in love with at this point, even though I hadn't made them up. And finally he was like, why won't you write this story? And I said, because it's yours, and if I get it wrong, you'll be mad at me. Just don't see that being a good thing. And he said,
yeah.
no, 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 okay, you can change anything you want. You can write any story you want. I just want you to use the world. And I
Mm,
did end up using Dalmir and Graydon, because they were so woven into the fabric of how the story started. But everybody else is mine. Um, Except
yeah.
obviously the seven brothers and Graydon. But yeah, it was super fun. And so then whenever I had a question, I'd be like, oh hey, can we put a river here? Because he also draws all my maps, and I need a town here, and hey, what should we call the currency, and does this country accept that country's currency, and sort of things where like I have a currency exchange, like a comment about it at one point in one of the books, and I'm like, I don't know that I've ever read about currency exchange in fantasy before, but it was super fun, and it was neat to write in a world that somebody else had built, because I didn't have to. Oh, hold on,
Oh,
telling me I had 5 minutes left, and then it was going to kick me off.
oh no. So, did we fix it? Are we good?
Yep, it's all good. I turned off the app limit.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just, you can tell that the world is really well built. But it's interesting because one of the things that I tell I teach in addition to writing. And so I tell my students who want to write books, they often get tripped up in like world building,
Mm-hmm.
and then they never write the story. And world building, I love it. It's fun, but in the end, it's a background for whatever the plot and the characters are, right?
Yeah,
It enriches your story, but it's not the story.
yeah,
So with your husband, that's probably what he is running into, is it's like you create this really rich world, but trying to create a story that goes along with it that's entertaining is extremely hard if you don't have that particular mindset.
yeah.
But I do wonder, because is it Win? Is
Mm-hmm.
that his name?
Yeah.
Isn't he the kind of like engineer
Yes.
person? Did you pick your
Yes.
husband's brain for that particular character and go, how,
Yes, to some extent, Win is modeled after my husband, so he
yeah.
gets to be in the story as well as the world builder. But yeah, he's like, wait, I think he it takes it as a compliment, but also he thinks it's a little odd.
Yeah, and Win tends to, like, I don't know if it was your intention, but like I know a lot of people with like that are on the spectrum,
Mhm,
and Win kind of reads to me as on the
mhm.
spectrum. Was that your intention with him, or was that kind of like, was it more just something you added into him, or was it something else?
Yeah, Win was a character who for a long time I didn't know who he was.
Mm.
Exactly. Like originally he was kind of just there as like a buddy for Graydon, and he was um a little he was my prankster. And then by the time I got to book two in the rough draft, Win was like, no, I don't actually play pranks, and I'm smart. And I was like, okay, cool, I can make you smart. He's like, no, 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 I'm scary smart. And I was like, oh well, that's harder because I'm not scary smart. And and then he was like, also I'm like really not good with lots of people, but I have lots of people in my family.
Mm.
And like he kind of has like this hyper focus,
Mhm.
and some ticks, right, that he
Yeah.
does that just kind of help him deal with the fact that like if he's nervous or if he's scared. So I wasn't really going for like necessarily on the spectrum, although I know that there are some similarities. I have some
Mhm.
friends where might have taken a couple of their mannerisms a little bit. But he is the engineer, and he was like super fascinated with trains. So I was like, well, I'm really trying not to make him autistic, because I know a lot of autistic characters are
Yeah.
portrayed as like being really into trains, and
Yeah.
that wasn't my point. But the train roads and the trains are a part of the history that's very interesting, to this
Mhm.
world. And so yeah, so kind of yes and no.
Yeah.
I guess is my answer.
Yeah. I'll be honest, he's probably like, he is up there in my top favorite. I just really
Oh
love him. He's just, I don't know, his heart, his sweetheartness came through, especially, I don't know if it was like book 3 when he was working on that
yeah,
other thing. Yes,
yeah,
okay. So in that one, I felt like I really got to know him better as a character, and so grew really attached to him. And so,
yeah.
and then I just, he's just kind of, like you said, he has an engineering mind. He's really smart, and but he's shy and kind
Yeah.
of introverted. And so, I don't know. You just want
Yeah.
to wrap him in a hug and be like, it's
Yes.
okay,
I love
So,
Win so much. One of my favorite things about Win is his friendship with Graydon, and just
mhm,
how Graydon has always been the person who could kind of pull him out of his shed and out of his design, mentality, and be like, come be a part of the world, come, meet these people. And Win felt safe with
mhm,
Graydon, and so he was able to do that. And that's one of the things I really loved in book three, where they are separated, they are on different
mhm.
missions. And
Yeah.
there's a moment where Win is like walking up to a new situation. He's going to meet a bunch of new people, and he's thinking, okay, what would Graydon do?
Mhm.
And meanwhile, across the continent, there's like an engineering problem that has to be solved. And Graydon is sitting there going, okay, what would Win do? And so they're both like that friendship, continues
Yeah.
to carry them through. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. I absolutely love that about them. They just have that dynamic, and then you added in I forgot how to pronounce his name.
Baron.
Baron.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a fun like Three Musketeers vibe you had going on, kind
Yeah.
of. And so unique and different,
Yeah.
and just really fun.
Yeah.
So speaking of male characters, how do you write them so well? Because I think your male characters are just, they do a great job of balancing like masculine traits with like, that caring interior. And so I'm just curious, do you have like, is your husband your beta reader? Do you have other people? Like, how do you do it?
Yeah. So I really attribute a lot of that to the fact that I was super blessed. My whole life, I've been surrounded by fantastic men. My grandpas, my uncles, my dad, just absolutely fantastic role models. Really what men should be. They are noble, they are heroic, they are strong, they are gentle. My dad, would read out loud to us, and anytime like something beautiful happened in a book, he would start to get choked up, but not in like a I'm crying sort of way, just in a like you could hear it in his voice and know like this was affecting him. And I'm sure he wouldn't really appreciate me telling that. um but just that, like, I didn't grow up with like that boys don't cry, type of,
Mm.
but that boys are strong, and that men are leaders. And I have two younger brothers who are my best friends in the whole world, and my husband obviously is also fantastic, and just kind of in that same vein of like, this is what true good, golden masculinity looks like. And so I have that. Like, I just been very, very blessed to be surrounded by that and be able to pull from that. Like, okay, you know, so I want Graydon to do this. What would my brother do? What would my dad do?
Mhm.
And then my dad is also my first beta reader. And so often he will be like, this isn't what, you know, somebody would say. He would say it like this. And so I do get a lot of that, like, um, that manly voice kind
Yeah,
of infused into things when people are talking, which is
yeah,
really helpful. And for example, like the letter, you know, that Graydon carries around with him.
yeah.
The rough draft of that was actually written by my dad.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was like, I need this to be written from a dad to a son. Can you do it? And he was like, okay.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah, I've definitely used my husband for beta reading of battles and stuff because
mhm,
battles are not my forte, and so he's really good about that part. But
mhm.
yeah, it's really amazing when you have kind of a support system to come around you and help you write something and bring it to life. And oh my goodness, that letter, yes, I yeah. Tissue boxes are needed in book 5. So, and you just surprised me. I was surprised. I didn't know what to expect, so I was surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. That
But
one was hard because I was like, okay, I've now been like building this up, and I didn't want it to become like the noodle incident in Calvin and Hobbes, where it'd be better not to even have it. I was like, oh, I want him to read it, or at least parts of it. And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I think you pulled it off wonderfully. So that's
Yay.
props to you and props to Grandpa, I guess, or Father, to
Yeah.
to help with that. So that's awesome. So who do you feel like is your audience for this book? Because I mean, it is mostly male characters. So do you feel like men would and women would read it, or do you feel like it's both, like more? What do you think in terms of male and female readers? Or
Yeah, this one is definitely geared more towards a male audience.
Mhm.
Like when I was writing it, I was really thinking about like my brothers being my audience. But when I think of my brothers, I always kind of picture them in high school, even though they're in their 30s. Um, but yeah, like this was very much. I wrote book 1, and my brother Grant just loved it, and so I kept writing the series mostly because he wanted more. And
Mhm.
at that point, you know, he was in his 20s. And by the time I finished it, you know, 10 years later. But yeah, that's kind of my audience. My target audience would be my two brothers for this particular series. But I think, yeah, that YA teenage boy, but also anybody who just, you know, wants fantasy with low to zero romance. which
Yeah,
is not
but-
which is hard to find right now.
yeah.
So
I would say the most romance you had was in the last book.
yeah,
I
yeah,
actually, I was
yeah,
like, there was like no romance for all these
right,
books until the very end.
yeah,
And even then, that was more. It was not what I would say traditional romances. I've
yeah,
read a lot of romance books. I like romance, but it was not the like pounding kind of romance, if that makes any sense
yeah.
whatsoever.
I would say Lord of the Rings level romance.
Yeah, noble, courtly, kind of reserved,
Yeah,
not passionate or swoony or anything like that. No.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but it is important. I think it is important that we have more books for guys because there aren't that many options. And yet I know there are plenty of guy readers out there that are looking for books that have male characters and themes and appeal to men. It's just that I think people tend to assume that it's just female readership because I think we're the more vocal ones on social media. But I know plenty of men in my life who enjoy reading books. They just
yeah,
aren't on social media.
yeah, yeah,
So I think that is a audience, an untapped audience, and more books need to be written towards that audience. So,
yeah,
but for all the ladies out there, I enjoyed them because they were just fun. And you can enjoy them because they're fun and they're interesting. You don't have to be male to enjoy these books. Um, So for research, I know we kind of talked about it a little bit where you did Band of Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any other research that you and then maybe your husband kind of had already done for the series to figure things out? I know you have robots as well, and then airships and airplanes and like weaponry as well. So
Yeah.
how did you kind of formulate that or come up with that?
Yeah, so I've watched Band of Brothers, and then I did a whole bunch of research on like um, skydiving and like how they teach you to land in the military, and just like watched videos on like military like training exercises for like teaching their paratroopers things. So that was a lot of fun. Uh, and then it was like, okay, but how do they teach you to land in like martial arts or in sword fighting? Because and it's very different. And so there's kind of this moment even where I used that knowledge where somebody who hasn't been training to land from uh, skydiving falls a ways, and because they don't land correctly, they get hurt, and the other people who have been learning how to land from a fall like that, they're fine. So that was kind of fun to kind of throw in with a lot of stuff with the airships. I talked to my husband, and one of the newer uh, airship technologies that shows up in book 5. Like he was like, "Oh, you should use this kind of engine," and it's like theoretical, and it hasn't really happened yet, but it is also kind of real. And so we used that, and so I'm like, okay, how do I describe that so that people know what I'm talking about? And then with the like that, so one of the characters creates hand cannons, and so was trying to figure out, okay, how would they use the ammunition? And was watching this episode of Smarter Every Day on YouTube where he was talking about a Prince Rupert's drop, which is like this piece of glass, like it's a like molten glass, and the the drop part of it is like super strong, and so you could take like a hammer to it and you would never, ever, ever be able to break this glass. But if the stem of it like takes even the slightest vibration, the whole thing shatters. And so he was showing it in this like super sped up, like super, like all the frames. I don't know how they do that, where they're basically doing it in such high frame rate that they're videoing that then when they slow it down, you can see like every single frame of like every millisecond. And that was cool. So I was like, okay, well, that's how the ammunition works. I don't know how it would work in real life. Probably wouldn't, but that was kind of the inspiration there. So yeah, a
That's
lot of different places.
Yeah, that's really cool. I had never, in my head, I guess I just pictured like regular ammunition just to fill in the
Uh-huh.
blanks. But that's really neat. That was kind of your idea behind it because
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
a little trivia for it.
Oh, I did
Well,
a lot of research on avalanches too for book
hmm.
2.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I have one, and
Hmm.
discovered that all the movies have been lying to us. Avalanches are not caused by loud noises, so
Oh,
that
yeah.
that was disappointing. And now anytime I read a book where an avalanche is caused by a loud noise, I'm like, not true.
I know well, I heard even about, I was listening to some podcast or something, and they were talking about, that really sad flood that happened, I think last summer with the
Yeah,
in camp. You remember all those poor kids died.
yeah.
But they were talking about flash floods and like
Mhm.
how fast they are, and then like how you can't scramble all the way. And
Yeah,
then I was just like, that's scary,
yeah.
just and how interesting that would also be as a story idea if you're trying to write a story with the flash flood.
Mhm.
It was a fascinating kind of tidbit of information. So it's always interesting when you go and learn something new,
Yeah,
from research.
yeah.
And for me, it was poisonous plants. I was like, oh, interesting. And then we
Yeah.
always, then you think of all the memes that talk about FBI, please don't look at my search history. I
Right.
promise I'm just an author. I'm just trying to figure this out. I have no
Absolutely.
interest. um, but, speaking of kind of more of like, I guess this is sad, but the death part of it. So like, especially in your 5th book, and I'll try not to give too many spoilers, but like, did you kind of research like PTSD and like how soldiers react in war and kind of go into that, because I felt like it was very like visceral, like you were there when people were like dying or being killed because of the war. So did you go in and research that, or do you have like, is it more knowledge, common knowledge that you know, or?
For me, it's probably more common knowledge. It's a lot of war movies. Um, my husband has several members of his family who are in the military or retired military, and so just over the years, kind of picking their brains. Um, like at one point, I asked one of them, I was trying to get like I worded the question really badly, and so I didn't get the answer I was looking for. But I
Yeah.
was trying to ask him, like, what do authors get wrong? Like
Mhm. Yeah.
when you read about military, because he reads a lot, what do authors get wrong? And instead, I asked, "What's hardest for you?" Which I meant like
Mhm.
hardest to swallow, and he was
Yeah.
like, "The memories." And I was like, "Oh." Which was a great answer. It wasn't
Yeah.
quite the answer I was looking for, but
Yeah.
that was kind of that, like, okay, yeah, that's, to that would be something that would be, this affects you, like this is, becomes a part of you. And my sister had a really neat conversation with a veteran who had a dog that helped him.
Mhm.
And so just things like that I've kind of picked up over the years, just from like actually talking to real people, and then also watching a lot of movies. And then one of the things that I think probably affects the way I write it as well is when I was younger, I did watch Rambo quite a lot as a high schooler, and just not that that's like super helpful, but just the way that like that really impressed on me, like the way that some of our soldiers were treated
Mhm.
when they came home,
Mhm.
from Vietnam specifically, but then
Yeah.
other soldiers as well, and just the tragedy of that, and how
Mhm.
much they saw, and how much it, you know how hard it was, and then to come home and not be appreciated, and not be you know helped at all. And so thinking about those things, and like I have a really good imagination. So being able to like, and very empathetic. And so being able to just kind
Mhm.
of sit there and think, okay, how would that affect me? Um, you know, and how would that affect anybody really? Uh, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really true. In my last book, I had to do a lot more kind of research into wars and thinking about wars.
Hmm.
I tend not to want to write about them just because it is kind of sad. Like, you just know, lots of people will pass, and, but at the same time, I think it's important, and I mean, not trying to be political, but we have a war going on right now. So it's like when you have things that are real life, it's important, I think, to portray it well, even if it's in a fantasy series. And I feel like you do a fantastic job of making us feel connected to the characters and understand like the consequences of what's going to happen, but also still like progressing the plot and going forward.
Hmm.
Um, and then like your finale was just epic. I definitely, it had like Avengers Infinity War kind of get like vibes at the end. So it's like
Yay.
we have this part and then we have the end. So look forward to that, everyone. Okay, so the other part of it. So this is, I don't know if you would consider it a Christian series necessarily, but more like clean steampunk. Is that kind of how you categorize it genre wise, or?
Yeah, I don't consider it to be a Christian book. I am a Christian, and so my worldview comes through in everything I write, but
Mhm.
I'm
Right,
not necessarily trying to write evangelistic fiction.
right. Yeah, I would agree with that too. But I think, as authors, even if we are trying to not incorporate like too much of our, like you said, evangelize through our books still speak because God lives in us, and so he speaks
Absolutely.
through our words. Um, and so in this case, I really liked the character, like the name, the builder, which is the name for your God character. So why did you choose that particular terminology for God in this
Yeah.
case?
So a couple reasons, actually. First of all, was just trying to come up with something that was, when you're naming the main god character of a series, right? And you're trying to like honor the one true God that you worship, right? There's kind of that like I want to be careful, right? I don't want to
Mhm.
give God a name that isn't respectful of who he is, but at the same time, also remembering that there are people in the Bible who gave God names, like Hagar, for specifically called him the God who sees me,
Right.
and so knowing that that's not a sacrilegious thing to do, um, but also just uh, wanting to use something that was a little bit more universal and
Mhm.
thinking about world building and then also how like I relate to God a lot as a father because I had a great father, have a great father,
Mhm.
and also my dad was a builder. He built houses, and
Mhm.
then also as an author, as a creative, really that's something that always speaks to me is how creative God is and how He is the author of everything, and everything we see is the story he's writing. But then also kind of going, well, calling him the author in a book just seems a little self-serving. So I went with builder just because it's kind of that
Yeah.
same kind of connotates that same like creative and creator of everything. And for me that's also a big thing is how he created everything. Like if most other um, gods, lowercase g gods in that people worship in reality or that are in stories, that's one thing that gets left out is that they created everything, right? You don't really have that anywhere other than the Christian God. And so just kind of that idea that like he's the builder of everything was kind of where that came from.
Yeah, and I really liked it because in relation to the orbs and the orb users, which I felt like Delmer and his kin were basically builders in a sense, like miniature builders. Like there's
Yeah.
the great builder, obviously, but then miniature builders, right? The
Yep.
orbs were meant to create, not destroy.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that concept or that idea of like miniature builders.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you categorize Delmere. Would you say like he's like Lord of the Rings elf? Or is it like angelic sort of being, but not? And then
Yeah.
his his lover, because I don't know what else to call her.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like how do you categorize these kind
Yeah.
of because he's a physical being,
Right.
but
So
this kind
Dalmir,
of, yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
Dalmir and his brothers were human.
Okay,
They were human. They were seven sons of a king.
okay,
And this short story is coming at some point. It's mostly written. But they were seven sons of a king, and they were sent to the library to find a solution, like to a political problem that their kingdom was facing. And when they did the things that they did that caused the library to basically be severed from their world, the builder gave them all of that knowledge, immortality, like true immortality, like they can't even be killed type of thing,
right,
and a portion of his power and the duty to basically give that knowledge to the people because they had robbed it from their own
yeah,
people
yeah,
and ultimately changing their lives forever. Um, and so yeah, so they're kind of a weird like Gandalf-esque, but without the
yeah,
angelic part of that, because they
yeah.
were just human to begin with,
Okay,
and then given these, so I guess a little bit of like Gandalf meets the prophets of the Bible, because they had some pretty crazy
yeah.
abilities. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I was very curious and I can't wait to read that short story. So I guess, a little pressure to finish it.
Yeah.
Just because I want to know, it seems fascinating. And then you kind of had a tie-in to your other books. Was that
Mhm.
always from the beginning? Was that
Nope.
the intention from the
Nope.
beginning? Okay, I was curious. I was like,
That just,
okay.
yeah, that just kind of happened. as I was writing the final draft, and it was like, oh yeah, that's how it ends.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
oh, and
and
so you asked about Shiori a little bit.
yes.
So she's also human, but from a different world.
Okay.
And so she's got a whole story as well. That's like partially fleshed out in my head. I don't know if I'll ever write it down, but
Okay.
basically her people were the caretakers of this great library, and the library is kind of this interdimensional, like everybody can access it
Right.
from any
Right.
world. But again, Dalmir and his brothers severed the connection to their
Right.
world. And so, but she's like the last of her people. And
Okay.
so, because of that, she has also been given that immortality and also a little bit of power, not as much as the brothers were, because she wasn't meant
And
to be a leader the way that they were.
is her story already written, or is
No,
it something
her
that's in
story is
progress?
just kind of in my head.
Okay. It's going to come one day,
Yeah,
guys.
maybe, yeah,
Maybe. If
probably.
we all pressure Jenelle enough, she'll write it for us, okay? That's
Yes.
what it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fascinated with that idea. I love the idea of an interdimensional library. The first time I ever saw it was on one of the scariest episodes of Doctor Who, the
Yes.
library. But this one's a good library, guys. So there are no scary interdimensional beings trying to eat you.
No.
But I thought it was fascinating because it's a fascinating idea of there's a library with infinite knowledge that like almost like God is the keeper of all this knowledge that he gives to us.
Yeah.
Like that is really cool. And for all the bibliophiles who love books, the idea of that sounds fantastic. And wouldn't it be awesome if we got to heaven and God's like, yeah, so you know that library you were imagining? Here it is.
Yeah.
There you go.
Your
And all the books
eternity.
C.S. Lewis
Maybe.
has written, you know.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome.
It would be fantastic. So, well, thank you so much for spending time with me. To kind of wrap up, I would love for you to tell people first, like, what's kind of next on your docket in terms of, like, what are you planning to publish next? You know, we teased about works in progress, but what are you planning to publish next? Where can people find you and follow you? After this video is done, I, of course, plan to post it on Instagram for people to rewatch, even if they didn't catch it live. So why don't you go ahead and say that?
Yeah. So what's next is actually a sequel to An Echo of the Fae. I've been working on that for a couple of years now. When you're trying to edit and publish and release 5-book series, and then you throw in an extra standalone that's sort of related in 3 years, that's a lot. So writing kind of happened in fits and bursts, but I am probably about 10,000 words from the end of that. And so it already has a cover, so that's exciting. And so yeah, the next bit is just finishing that draft and then all the edits. And then after that, I'm not entirely certain. I think there will be a third book in that series. That's my kind of my middle grade portal fairy tale
Mhm.
series. I also have some other fairy tale retellings that are a little bit on the shorter side, and so working on something short sounds lovely. However, I also know that, like you said, there just aren't enough books for boys out there. And so there's a certain amount of, yes, I want to write my sparkly fairy tales, but I also really want to write possibly a sequel series to Turrim that would come a couple hundred years in the future. And I've been thinking about a sequel series to my original Minstrel Song series, which is more of that epic fantasy with dragons, where that would be also another like a future series. Um, so I don't know exactly yet. Right now, I'm working on the sequel to An Echo of the Fae,
Yeah.
and yeah,
And I am looking forward to that one too.
yeah.
Because like I said, that was the first book I read by you that led me to discover your other ones. So I just know personally for me, you're an auto buy author. So it's like, I'm just going to go find your books, read them, whatever that you write. It's
Aw.
going to be, so it's so funny because I have certain genres, but then certain authors, it's like, I don't care what you write. I enjoy everything that you've written. So you're one of them. So let audience know That's how I feel about Jenelle, and you can feel the same. So I'm looking forward to that. But where can people, like, if they want to know more about you and your books, where's the best place to find you and follow you?
Yeah, the best place would be my website, JenelleSchmidt.com. If you go to JenelleSchmidt.com/subscribe, you can subscribe either to my blog or to my newsletter or to both. My blog posts tend to be more like current things like book reviews, movie reviews, random things that I'm thinking about right now. And my newsletters tend to be more like, here's kind of my life update and all the things I'm writing and reading and working on. And then occasionally I'll send out random snippets on there as well. I don't really know how to use my newsletter. I'll just be super real with everybody. I'm still learning how to do that. But I have been told that newsletters are important, and I've been getting more like actual responses, so I think I'm getting better at it.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that for whatever reason, and technology is what it is. I know I've tried to subscribe to your blog, but not get as many news things. But your newsletter works fine, and that could
Okay.
just be on my end. But just
I
letting you
haven't
know, like the
really,
newsletter tends
yeah,
to work better for whatever reason. So
yeah. Probably if you've subscribed to my blog and you haven't been getting anything, it's probably because I haven't been writing anything there. Not
good. I was
because
like,
like you're not
oh,
signed up correctly. I have been sadly neglecting the blog a lot the last couple of years, just trying to get the Turrim Archive out and being like, okay,
yeah,
I only have time to write one thing. So I'm gonna
yeah,
write books.
yeah.
So
And having the book in your hands is way more important than those things. So I get
yeah.
it. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for joining me, and happy release day.
Thank you.
Super
Thanks so much for
excited.
putting this together. It's been fun.
You're welcome. And I will talk to you online whenever.
All
Bye,
right.
everyone.
Bye. Okay, how do I turn that?